In this video essay, I will speculate on 4 possible nation states that could come to existence in the future. This will be done through looking at 4 different case studies, namely Scotland, independent from the political and economic union of the United Kingdom. Secondly, through looking at the possibility of a Greater Kurdistan made up of territory from 5 different nation states. Thirdly, the possibility of a united Ireland with the 6 counties of the north unifying with the counties of the south. And fourthly, looking at the possibility of the autonomous community of Catalonia breaking from Spain. An independent Scotland. Since the creation of the Scottish Parliament at Holyrood in 1997, supporters of Scottish independence have used the parliamentary body as a training ground to gain governmental experience as well as amplify the voices for pro-independence. Whilst the Scottish referendum of 2014 returned a no vote and was meant to settle the constitutional question for a generation, many pro-independent voices and parties, most notably the SNP, the Scottish Greens and Alex Salmond's Alba Party, argue that circumstances have changed since 2014. Whilst it's only the UK government that can legally authorise a second referendum on the question of Scottish independence, not Holyrood, from a normative perspective, if Scotland returns a pro-majority to the Parliament in the May 2021 election, then it's hard for Boris Johnson's Conservative and Unionist Party to deny that democratic mandate. And it has been reported the SNP will press Westminster for those legal powers to hold a second referendum, and are already arguing that Boris Johnson is in effect denying democracy to the Scots. The SNP has been in power for 14 years, and devolution seems to have heightened the likelihood of Scottish independence rather than being a bulwark to it. Tony Blair reflected most recently in an ITV interview that New Labour's devolution agenda did not stop the rise of nationalism, but insisted that if Labour had done nothing and not implemented its 1997 manifesto commitment for a Scottish Parliament to devolve powers to Scotland, that the Union would already be in tatters. A Greater Kurdistan, a state for the Kurds. The proposed nation of Kurdistan would comprise a territory of at least 5 different sovereign states, those namely being formed from northern Kurdistan in eastern Turkey, southern Kurdistan in northern Iraq, eastern Kurdistan in northwestern Iran, western Kurdistan in northern Syria, and part of Armenia. In Zainab Kaya's 2020 book, Mapping Kurdistan, Territory, Self-Determination and Nationalism, she draws attention to the universal ideas of self-determination, territorial identity, and international norms to provide a lens of analysis which allows us to envision what a united Kurdistan homeland in the abstract, propagated by the promotion of the map of Greater Kurdistan, would look like. Looking at the map of Greater Kurdistan, it clearly places Kurdistan at the centre, not the margin, in relation to the geographical region. And its image hopes to embed in the consciousness of Kurds and the international community the idea of Kurdistan existing as a homeland for the Kurds. In this sense, the map acts as a political symbol, like an anthem, flag, or public office. The way the course of history has unfolded in the region has ensured that the Kurds endure a systemic state of statelessness. This is due predominantly to subrogation during the 19th century under the Ottoman Empire, to the systemic oppression suffered by the Kurds by Turkey and the Arab majority states of Iraq and Syria, who fear the implications of an independent Kurdistan. In light of not achieving independence, Kurds have pursued regional autonomy. This can be seen most starkly in the autonomous Kurdistan region of present-day Iraq. However, Kurdish actors are very careful with what they say in regards to pursuing further self-determination in order to respect the territorial sovereignty and political realities under which they exist. This is because the consequences can be dire if these orthodoxies are pushed too far. This sentiment reflected in the backlash to the Iraqi Kurds 2017 in the form of a referendum where 93% voted in favour of independence. This triggered a military operation in which the Iraqi government retook control of Kirkuk and the surrounding areas and forced the administration to annul on the referendum. Proponents of a Greater Kurdistan make the claim that the nation state of the Kurds should be naturally forming. Whilst this seems normatively legitimate and intuitively correct, the history of nation-state formation and the realities of international relations teaches us that states are, in effect, artificially created and are formed out of social, cultural, and political construction. Thus, the prospects of a greater Kurdistan coming into existence heavily depends on the political will of the nation-states it comprises of, as well as the international community, to give a homeland to the Kurds. The prospects of a united Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 ended the violent phase of recent conflict in Northern Ireland. All groups involved in the conflict committed themselves to accepting that Northern Ireland would remain part of the United Kingdom as long as a majority supported it. As the 21st century develops, the prospects of a united Ireland become more likely as demographic changes occur, the implications of Brexit become more stark, and the arc of history bends towards Irish unity. However, there's still a lot of administrative work that needs to be done before United Ireland could come into existence and work practically. Mayor Lee MacDonald, the president of Sinn Féin, has made the ambitious estimation that United Ireland could exist in the next 10 years. Other politicians from the centre-left and centre-right of Irish politics, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, can no longer put their head in the sand, admitting that a border poll is likely in their generation. Even the former Democratic Unionist Party leader and former First Minister, Peter Robinson, has called out border poll deniers and argues that more politicians, north and south, as well as the Westminster government, need to pay attention to the possibility and likelihood of unification happening earlier than we first thought. From a legalist perspective, when a border poll should be called is simple. The Good Friday Agreement states that the Secretary of State of the United Kingdom should call a referendum if, at any time it appears likely to him, that majority of those voting would express a wish that Northern Ireland would cease to be part of the United Kingdom and form part of a united Ireland. However, what form unification would look like is still up in the air, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions in regards to this. Before a border poll is held, it is essential that the Irish government, Northern Ireland Assembly, and the British government have talks and discussions about what form politically a united Ireland would take. These discussions should be inclusive and also consult civil society groups, key individuals, and the general public. A new Ireland could be federal or unitary, might or might not retain the power-sharing institutions created by the Belfast Agreement, sharing who has power in the new government, or all power could be centralised. What is essential is in these prospectus talks that unionists feel included and feel part of the discussions. United Ireland should be about the extension of individual rights and freedoms for those in the north, to reassure unionists who are uneasy about the implications of United Ireland on their identity. Also, from a pragmatic perspective, proponents of United Ireland must also reassure inhabitants in the north that their weariness surrounding the possibility of losing their access to universal healthcare for the United Kingdom's National Health Service is protected by something similar or better in a United Ireland scenario. Catalonia, independent from Spain. The cause for Catalan independence is best understood not from a left or right perspective, but from a historical, cultural and moral one. For many, independence from Spain would be a cathartic exercise to reverse the trauma suffered during the Francesco Franco dictatorship, which lasted from 1938 to 1973. During Franco's rule, there was a promotion of a unitary and homogeneous national identity, which resulted in the systemic oppression of many aspects of Catalan's distinctive identity. Many of the cultural activities that made up Catalan identity were suppressed through wide-scale censorship, including the sardana, the national dance of Catalonia, as well as the Catalan language. In addition, the Spanish state sentenced many Catalan leaders and politicians to death, whilst others were forced into exile. The transgenerational trauma of this period of Spanish history has only just started to be reversed, and in part this reversal of trauma is expressed politically in the cause for Catalan independence. Franco's death in 1973 ushered in a period of democratic transition, whereby Catalonia's democratic liberties were restored and the Spanish state recognised the existence of Catalonia as an autonomous community separate from the rest of Spain. This reflected in the new constitution of 1978. The interpretations of these ambiguities were to be the main causes of tensions between the regional government of Catalonia and the central government of Spain. Playing on these ambiguities, in 2006, the Catalan Parliament approved a new self-government charter that included a series of preambular references to Catalan nationhood. However, the Constitutional Court of Spain in 2010 reached its verdict and struck down large parts of the Catalan statute. This resulted in a million-strong protest in Barcelona and over time a disconnect between a perceived unrepresentative government in Madrid and the Catalan region. In October 2017, this disconnect came to a head, with the Catalan government organising an illegal referendum of self-determination and announcing its intention to declare independence unilaterally. The Spanish state responded with police violence on the streets and riot forces storming polling stations on the day of the referendum to suppress the democratic revolt. After the poll, the Catalan Parliament attempted to ratify the 92 yes votes in favour of independence in a unilateral declaration of independence from Spain. The Spanish Senate responded by evoking Article 155 to strip Catalonia of some of its autonomous powers and began governing the region centrally from Madrid. The authoritarian-esque crackdowns by the Spanish state seem to have failed to quell pro-independence aspirations. In a sense, they seem to have given the movement greater incentive to strive for independence. In 2006, only 13% of Catalans expressed their preference for an independent state. By 2013, this had decreased to 48%. In 2021, pro-independence parties broke a watershed by winning over 50% of the popular vote for the first time and increased their representation in the parliament from 70 to 74 seats.